For a long time, we lived with a comforting illusion about the brain. We believed it was mostly finished after childhood, shaped early, then sealed, slowly declining with age. We assumed that silence meant inactivity, that rest meant stillness, and that learning was something added to the mind rather than something that reshaped it. These beliefs were not just wrong. They quietly limited what we believed was possible. Modern science has dismantled these assumptions. The brain is never truly quiet. Even in moments of rest, it is alive with activity. Networks firing, patterns shifting, systems preparing for what comes next. Far from being fixed, the brain is constantly changing, reorganizing itself in response to experience, behavior, effort, and repetition. Every skill you practice, every habit you reinforce, every thought you return to leaves a physical trace behind. This ability of the brain to change itself is called neuroplasticity, and it has transformed our understanding of learning and human potential. Learning is not merely mental, it is biological. When you learn something new, your brain does not simply store information, it rewires itself. Chemical signals strengthen or fade, connections between neurons grow or weaken, and entire networks adjust how and when they activate. In this way, learning reshapes the architecture of who you are. For decades, scientists believed that after puberty, the brain could only decline, that aging meant loss and injury meant permanence. Research has revealed something far more powerful. The adult brain is capable of remarkable reorganization, even after damage, even later in life. But this truth carries responsibility. Your behavior is shaping your brain right now, whether you are aware of it or not. Short-term effort can create quick improvements, but lasting change requires time. Temporary gains come from chemical shifts. Real learning comes from structural change. This is why progress can vanish overnight, why mastery is slow and demanding, and why repetition and consistency matter more than talent. Neuroplasticity does not promise ease, it promises possibility. It explains why habits become automatic, why expertise leaves a physical mark on the brain, and why recovery is possible, yet uneven and deeply personal. Plasticity varies from person to person. Understanding its limits is as important as recognizing its power. The strongest driver of change in the brain is not intention or desire, but behavior, repeated, deliberate action. This book begins there, not with fantasy, but with reality. Not with instant transformation, but with a deeper understanding of how change truly happens. Because once you understand how the brain reshapes itself, you are no longer bound by old myths. The brain is not finished with you yet. If this already makes your mind race, good. That's the point. Subscribe to uncover the hidden mechanics of your mind. Like if you've ever wondered why habits control you more than willpower. Share if you know someone who needs to see the truth about their brain, and comment below. Because once you become aware, silence is no longer an option. Let's begin. Chapter 1. You are never the one in control. At night, when the city thins into shadows, there is a moment just before sleep when thoughts loosen their grip. The room feels larger. Sounds stretch. Somewhere between wakefulness and forgetting, your mind begins to speak without asking you. Images surface. Old conversations replay. A sentence you never meant to remember returns intact. You did not invite it. It came anyway. That moment is honest, because it reveals something most people spend their lives avoiding. You are not the author of your thoughts. You are their witness. The brain was never built for truth. It was built for survival. Truth is expensive, slow, demanding, uncertain. Survival is efficient. It favors shortcuts, habits, predictions. The brain evolved to guess correctly often enough to keep you alive, not to understand the world as it is. Accuracy is optional. Efficiency is not. This is the core idea. Stated plainly, control was never the goal. Continuity was. Your brain's highest loyalty is not to you, but to what has worked before. What you call choice is usually the end of a long process that finished before you noticed it begin. Consciousness, the part of you that narrates, explains, justifies, arrives late. It is not the commander. It is the press secretary. By the time you become aware of a decision, the machinery beneath has already voted. Signals have fired, pathways have competed. The winner emerges, and consciousness steps in to claim authorship. I decided, no, you explained. This is not philosophy, it is physiology. Long before a thought reaches awareness, the brain has weighed probabilities based on past repetition. What felt safe? What felt rewarding? What reduced friction? The outcome that requires the least energy usually wins. The brain prefers the familiar even when the familiar hurts, especially when it hurts predictably. Plasticity makes this worse. A brain that can change does not become freer. It becomes trainable. Repetition is the language it understands best. Do something once and it's an event. Do it twice and it's a suggestion. Do it often enough and it becomes structure. Neurons that fire together wire together. Not because they should, but because they did. Consider a man who insists he values honesty, yet lies reflexively to avoid discomfort. Each lie reduces tension. The brain records relief as reward. Over time, honesty becomes expensive. Lying becomes efficient. Or a woman who checks social media whenever boredom whispers. The action delivers novelty, validation, escape. The brain releases dopamine. The loop tightens. Months later, silence feels unbearable. She calls it addiction. The brain calls it optimization. The lie of choice survives because it feels empowering. If you chose it, you can change it. But what if you didn't choose? What if you rehearsed? What if your preferences are not expressions of freedom, but echoes of exposure? This is the hidden architecture of control. Not commands, but environments, not force, but frequency. Your brain does not ask whether a pattern is good for you. It asks whether it is familiar. It does not seek meaning. It seeks momentum. Once a pathway is reinforced, it resists interruption. Contradictory information feels wrong, not because it is false, but because it is inefficient. This is why people defend habits that hollow them out. Why change feels like grief. Why awareness alone rarely saves anyone. A child raised in chaos develops hypervigilance. The brain learns that danger is constant. Calm feels suspicious. As an adult, they seek intensity. Not because they enjoy it, but because it matches the wiring. They call it personality. The brain calls it calibration. A worker conditioned by urgency cannot rest without guilt. A student trained for grades forgets how to think. A society flooded with stimulation loses the ability to sit with ambiguity. These are not moral failures. They are neural outcomes. Here is the insight that unsettles even experts. The brain does not distinguish between training and living. Whatever you repeat becomes training. You are being trained all the time by screens that reward interruption, by systems that punish slowness, by cultures that equate worth with output, by narratives that simplify reality into slogans. And the more plastic the brain, the deeper the imprint. Now turn toward yourself. Notice how often your reactions arrive before your reasons, how quickly you justify impulses that appeared fully formed, how familiar paths feel right, simply because they are worn. This is not failure, it is evidence. The mini-climax comes quietly, like a door closing behind you. If control was never yours, responsibility changes shape. You cannot will yourself free in a moment, but you can decide what repeats. You can choose what you expose yourself to long enough to become structure. This is slower than motivation, harder than inspiration, more honest than belief. The brain obeys repetition. That is the danger and the leverage. If you continue as before, nothing dramatic will happen. That is how control persists. It looks like normal life. If you intervene deliberately, discomfort will follow. Confusion, resistance, fatigue. These are signs you are interrupting efficiency. The brain hates that. This chapter is not an accusation. It is a warning. You are never the one in control, but now you know where control actually lives. Not in intention, not in desire, in design, in what you allow to repeat until it no longer asks. Philosophers once argued about free will as if it were an abstract prize. Neuroscience dragged it into the body and left it there, breathing, changing, vulnerable. Freedom, it turns out, is not a feeling. It is a practice maintained against the brain's preference for ease. The final truth is simple and uncomfortable. You do not become what you want. You become what you rehearse. And the brain, loyal to its nature, will follow whatever you repeat, truth or not, until it feels like destiny. Chapter 2. The brain never rests, and that's the trap. At 3 a.m, the hallway light flickers for no reason. You're awake, but not fully. The house breathes, pipes click, somewhere a clock counts in the dark. You tell yourself you're doing nothing, just lying there empty, waiting for sleep. Then a memory rises, then another, a worry, a face, a sentence you never finished. The mind begins arranging pieces without your permission. You did not summon it. You cannot stop it. You cannot stop it. This is the first trap. The belief that rest equals silence. The brain never rests, it idles. And idling is not neutral. When the body stops moving, the brain does not follow. It turns inward, running simulations, rehearsing futures, revisiting past, stitching meaning from fragments. This activity is ancient, older than language, older than reason. It exists to prepare you for what might come next. But preparation has a cost. In the absence of direction, the brain defaults to what it knows best, what it has been fed most often. That is the core idea, stated without comfort. Idle moments are not empty, they are occupied. And whoever filled your patterns decides what appears when nothing else does. Neuroscience calls it default mode, a network that lights up when you stop doing, a background hum that grows louder in stillness. It scans for relevance. It compares, it judges, it tells stories about who you are and what the world intends. This network does not ask for truth, it asks for coherence. It will make something fit even if it must distort everything else. Mental silence is impossible because the brain was never designed to shut off, only to shift tasks. When there is no external demand, it turns to maintenance, identity, memory, prediction. It reviews what you did wrong, it rehearses what you might say. It tightens old knots. And because repetition strengthens pathways, the thoughts that recur most easily are the ones you have practiced without realizing it. This is why doing nothing feels heavy now. Why boredom tastes like anxiety. Why stillness exposes noise you didn't know you carried. The mind is not failing. It is revealing its contents. And here is where power enters. In a world saturated with stimulation, silence becomes rare. Every pause is filled by screens, feeds, alerts, background sound. These intrusions don't need to persuade you, they only need to occupy the idle. Because whatever fills the gap gets rehearsed. Whatever gets rehearsed becomes familiar. Whatever becomes familiar becomes preferred. A man waits in line and reaches for his phone without noticing. A woman stops at a red light and checks notifications. A child sits quietly and is handed a tablet to keep them busy. These are not habits of impatience. They are training protocols. The brain learns that emptiness is to be avoided, that attention should fragment, that relief arrives instantly and externally. Over time, the default mode adapts. Instead of reflection, it anticipates interruption. Instead of curiosity, it craves novelty. When the noise finally stops, the brain panics, not because it is broken, but because it has been conditioned to expect input. This is the weaponization of idle moments. Consider the office worker who feels uneasy during lunch without emails, or the student who cannot read without checking messages, or the parent who fills every quiet second with sound. The brain has learned that stillness equals deprivation. It fills the gap with restlessness, self-criticism, vague dread. Silence becomes hostile territory. Now the hidden truth, whoever controls the background controls the mind. Not the headline, not the argument. The background, the repeated tone, the subtle cues, the emotional weather. The stories that seep in when you are tired enough to stop resisting. This is why propaganda works best when you're distracted. Why advertising targets downtime. Why anxiety blooms at night. The brain left alone will replay what it knows. If what it knows is fear, it rehearses fear. If it knows urgency, it rehearses urgency. If it knows comparison, it rehearses inadequacy. You may believe you are resting, but your brain is practicing. A woman lies awake replaying conversations she wishes she had handled differently. Each replay sharpens regret. The brain strengthens pathways of self-blame. Months later, confidence erodes. She calls it overthinking. The brain calls it reinforcement. A man scrolls endlessly before sleep, absorbing fragments of outrage and desire. The images fade, but the emotional residue remains. His dreams grow restless. His mornings feel heavy. He calls it fatigue. The brain calls it saturation. Here is the insight most never hear. The default mind is programmable. Not by force, but by frequency. Not by logic, but by exposure. You don't need to believe a message for it to shape you. You only need to encounter it often enough while unguarded. Now I am speaking to you. Think about the moments you consider harmless. The waiting, the scrolling, the background noise, the just killing time. Ask yourself what fills the space when you stop trying. What thoughts surface first? What emotions feel automatic? That is not randomness. That is your training showing itself. The mini-climax arrives when this clicks. If the brain never rests, then every moment is influence. There is no neutral time, no empty space, only conscious direction or unconscious drift. This is not a call to control every thought. That would be another trap. It is a call to recognize that silence reveals ownership. If your quiet mind does not belong to you, something else already does. To reclaim it requires friction, deliberate pauses, chosen inputs, discomfort. The brain resists this because it prefers the easy loop. Expect irritation. Expect boredom. Expect the mind to rebel. That is the cost of interrupting automation. Philosophically, this changes everything. Freedom is not found in grand decisions, but in what occupies you when nothing demands you. Identity is not forged in action alone, but in the background stories you rehearse when the lights go out. The brain never rests, and that is the trap, unless you decide what it rests on. Chapter 3. The Brain That Obeys Repetition. The metronome clicks in a windowless room. Tick, tick, tick. At first it's irritating, an intruder in the silence. Then it fades. Not because it stops, but because your mind adjusts. Minutes pass, the sound becomes background. Eventually, if it were to disappear, you would notice the absence like a missing tooth. That is how repetition works. Not by force, by settling in. The most dangerous thing about the brain is not that it can be convinced, it's that it can be trained. Intelligence argues. Willpower negotiates. Repetition decides. It bypasses debate and writes directly into tissue. Neurons fire, then fire again. Connections thicken. What once required effort becomes automatic. What becomes automatic stops asking whether it should exist. This is the core idea. Stripped of romance, the brain obeys what happens most often. Not what you admire, not what you believe, what you repeat. Intelligence feels powerful because it explains, it categorizes, it gives reasons. But intelligence is slow, expensive, and easily outpaced by habit. You can understand something perfectly and still be ruled by what you practice daily. Values live in language. Habits live in the body. When the two collide, the body usually wins. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, makes this inevitable. Plastic systems do not ask why. They respond to pressure. Frequency, duration. A plastic brain is a learning machine, and learning machines submit to input. This is not weakness, it is design. Consider how quickly a repeated action dulls resistance. The first cigarette burns the throat, the 10th soothes it, the 100th feels necessary. The brain adapts not because it approves, but because adaptation reduces friction. It reshapes itself to make repetition easier next time. This is efficiency disguised as desire. Habits override values because habits are embodied. They do not need your permission. They operate beneath the level of choice. You can value health and still reach for sugar, value honesty and still lie reflexively, value freedom and still check the same screen every 5 minutes. The brain does not betray you. It follows training. This is where submission enters the conversation. Every repeated behavior is a submission to its own continuation. Each time you comply, you vote for its survival. Over time, the brain reallocates resources to support what you do most. Circuits that are used grow more excitable. Circuits that are neglected weaken. This is not symbolic. It is literal. Structure follows use. A man prides himself on discipline, yet every night he numbs himself with endless entertainment. He tells himself it's rest. The brain learns otherwise. Focus circuits quiet down. Stimulation circuits grow loud. Weeks later, work feels unbearable without distraction. He lectures himself about willpower. The brain has already chosen efficiency. A woman believes deeply in creativity, but postpones it daily until later. Each postponement strengthens avoidance. The brain learns that delay equals relief. Eventually, the thought of creating triggers anxiety. She calls it a block. The brain calls it training complete. Here is the surprising truth. The brain does not distinguish between training for survival and training for submission. It only knows that repetition means importance. This is why systems of power love routine. Why schedules shape obedience better than ideology. Why environments matter more than speeches. A brain exposed to the same demands day after day adapts to meet them. Not consciously, structurally. Over time, resistance feels unnatural. Not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. Repetition also hides its tracks. Because change is gradual, it feels invisible. You don't notice the slope while walking downhill. You only notice when climbing back up feels impossible. The brain, loyal to the path it knows, resists reversal. It calls the old route home. Here's the insight most people miss. You do not submit once. You submit incrementally. A skipped action, a small compromise, a repeated exception. The brain records each one, not as guilt, as data. Now look at your own patterns. What do you do when tired? When bored? When uncomfortable? Those moments reveal your true training. Not who you want to be, but who your brain is preparing you to continue as. Repetition has already made decisions on your behalf. The mini-climax arrives with an uncomfortable realization. Values without repetition are decoration. They hang on the walls of the mind, admired but untouched. Habits live in the wiring. They act. This does not mean you are powerless. It means power lives elsewhere than you were taught to look. Not in grand resolutions, but in what you repeat when motivation is absent. The brain does not need passion to change. It needs consistency. This is where submission can be reclaimed. The same mechanism that enslaves can be redirected. Repetition does not care about morality. It cares about frequency. Deliberate repetition feels boring and impressive, slow. That is why it works. The brain relaxes its guard around what feels mundane. It allows it in. If you repeat discomfort deliberately, the brain adapts. If you repeat focus, it strengthens. If you repeat silence, it learns to tolerate depth. This is not inspiration, it is engineering. But be warned, the brain resists reprogramming fiercely. Expect friction, fatigue, doubt. The old pathways will demand tribute. They are efficient, and efficiency defends itself. This chapter is not asking you to admire repetition. It is asking you to respect it. Philosophically, this collapse is a comforting illusion. Freedom is not a feeling you summon. It is a pattern you maintain against gravity. The brain will always slide toward what is easiest. Mastery is choosing the slope. In the end, the brain that obeys repetition is neither enemy nor ally. It is a mirror. It reflects what you do, not what you mean. And it will follow whatever you rehearse, patiently, faithfully, until it feels like fate. Choose your repetitions carefully. They are already choosing you. Chapter 4. Learning is physical, and that means you can be rewritten. The air in the lab is cold, metallic, sterile, but it hums with life. Machines breathe softly, monitors glow faintly, and a faint scent of ozone drifts from circuits overworked with data. A single chair sits at the center, surrounded by wires and blinking lights, waiting for a volunteer who thinks they are in control. You sit. You believe you are here to watch, to learn, to choose. But by the time the first pulse of current hums through a coil, you understand a truth most ignore. Learning is not ethereal. It is concrete. It is material. Every thought leaves a trace. Every memory carves a groove. Every habit scratches a scar into the tissue of your brain. This is the core idea, stripped bare. Your mind is a malleable body, and every idea is a chisel. The brain does not debate the beauty or morality of a thought. It records it. It strengthens the circuits that fire. It weakens those that do not. Beliefs are not stored in logic. They are stored in structure. Your convictions are not abstract. They are tissue, vessels, electrical highways hardened by repetition. Consider this. When you recall a memory, you are not accessing a perfect record. You are rebuilding a pattern, firing the same circuits that first formed the thought. Each reconstruction reinforces that pattern. Every act of recollection carves deeper channels. This is why trauma lingers, why habits persist, why what is repeated becomes permanent. A man once believed he could speak truth in every situation, but at work, every subtle compromise he made, avoiding confrontation, smoothing lies, nodding politely, etched themselves into his neural landscape. Years later, he would say, "I am just not brave enough." The brain did not lie. The tissue did not argue. It remembers what was practiced, and courage unpracticed has no trace. A child told constantly that they are clumsy learns to believe it, not because they understand it, but because the repeated correction, the repeated shame rewires motor areas and emotional centers alike. Confidence is not a lesson. It is a neural architecture built from experience or its absence. Memory, in this sense, is more than recollection. It is alteration. Your neurons change in response to experience. Connections grow thicker or weaker. Networks expand or shrink. The brain remodels itself like clay on a wheel, and the hands shaping it are often invisible. When you believe you are making a choice, the pattern may already exist. waiting to be reinforced. Here is the hidden truth. Thoughts are not harmless. They are acts of construction, a fleeting fantasy, a half-formed doubt, a brief repetition. These all leave fingerprints in tissue. You are already being rewritten, continuously, silently. Even in moments you believe you are idle, your brain rehearses and reinforces patterns. Every exposure to media, every glance at your phone, every repeated emotion leaves structural marks. Ask yourself, how often do you allow patterns to replay without noticing? How often do you justify repetition as habit or personality? Every rationalization is another layer of material deposition. The mind is being sculpted, while the conscious you stands as a spectator, applauding the changes you did not choose. The mini-climax comes when this sinks in. You can be rewritten, but so can everyone else. The brain is not bound by morality. It does not respect wishes. It obeys patterns. Whoever controls the exposure, the repetition, the intensity, effectively controls the physical architecture of thought. Propaganda works not because it convinces you intellectually, but because it reshapes the structure that hosts your beliefs. Persuasion is a mechanical cellular process, and most people mistake its results for free will. Consider the addict. Every craving strengthens synaptic pathways devoted to that desire. Consider the soldier, trained for years to respond instinctively to commands, whose neural circuits now execute without hesitation. Consider the person who was raised in a world of scarcity and fear, whose default mode is survival, whose circuits reflexively anticipate loss. All were rewritten. All obeyed repetition more faithfully than reason. Now, I speak to you. Notice the behaviors that have become effortless, the emotional reactions that arrive before your logic engages, the habits you defend despite your values. These are the material scars of repetition. They are your neural inheritance. They are the architecture of your mind made visible only in action, not thought. And here is the darkest insight. The brain can be rewritten deliberately. The same principle that enslaves can be liberated. The tissue does not resist truth. It resists novelty. Repetition is the lever. Intention is the chisel. You cannot remove old traces with mere will, but you can overwrite them with deliberate, relentless practice. This is mastery, not inspiration. This is not courage. It is engineering. The final paragraph, the philosophical reflection, emerges quietly. Your thoughts are not whispers. They are fingerprints. Your beliefs are not dreams. They are grooves carved into living tissue. Every action, every repetition, every exposure leaves a mark. You are already being rewritten. And once you understand this, once you see the malleability of your mind, the choice is no longer whether you can change, but who or what will do the rewriting, and to what design. Because learning is physical, and what is physical can be controlled. Even when you think you are free, your brain remembers otherwise. Chapter 5. Chemical Chains, Short-Term Control. The neon light hums overhead, buzzing like an insect trapped behind glass. The city outside sleeps, or pretends to. Inside, you feel a tingle in your fingertips, a pull behind your eyes, a notification flashes, a ping. You obey instantly, even though nothing truly demanded it. You do not ask why. You do not resist. The chemical is waiting. It knows you before you know yourself. This is the nature of short-term control, invisible, immediate, seductive. The brain is not persuaded by reason. It is captivated by reward. Pleasure is a leash, and dopamine is the chain. Here is the core idea. Every reward you chase wires your brain to obey. Not just habits, not just patterns. Compliance itself is reinforced chemically. Your neurons do not care about ethics. They care about survival, repetition, and reward. And when reward arrives faster than thought, the mind yields. The mechanism is deceptively simple. A thought arises. An action follows. A chemical signal floods the synapses. Dopamine whispers. Do it again. The cycle repeats. Each repetition strengthens the connection, making the behavior automatic, desirable, inevitable. Learning is a machine. Reward is the lubricant. This is why pleasure is a tool of obedience. It does not compel with threat or logic. It teaches the brain that certain actions are not merely tolerated but sought after. Compliance becomes enjoyable. Resistance becomes discomfort. Every signal, every hit, every small gratification tightens the chain. Consider the child who touches a hot stove and is not burned. Consider the teenager whose likes and notifications define self-worth. Consider the employee whose email chime triggers the same rush as cash in a register. Each is a node in the network of chemical obedience. Each is being trained. Each responds not to instruction, but to internalized reward. The psychological breakdown is darker still. Reward does not just reinforce behavior, it reshapes priorities. A brain anticipating pleasure reorganizes resources. Attention narrows, patience shrinks, reflection weakens. Goals that cannot promise dopamine recede into irrelevance. Moral decisions compete against instant gratification and lose more often than you think. Stories illuminate this. A man checks his phone endlessly, telling himself it is research. Each notification triggers a spike of pleasure. He believes he is in control. He is not. The dopamine surge has enslaved his attention. Even his dreams echo with pings. A woman eats sugar to feel a flicker of energy, then repeats it daily. Each bite rewires craving pathways. Choices dissolve into automation. Pleasure has become authority. The hidden insight is cruelly simple. The brain cannot distinguish between short-term learning and chemical submission. Every reward reinforces the neural circuit. Every pleasure experienced in conjunction with the behavior teaches the body and mind that obedience is survival. This is why repetition under reward is more powerful than reasoning under restraint. The brain loves certainty, efficiency, and relief. Reward delivers all three. Addressing you directly, notice the moments you obey before thinking. Notice the impulse that feels like instinct. That is not instinct. That is training. Your brain, hungry for reward, has anticipated and acted. You only narrate afterward. The chemical reaction is already complete. You feel satisfaction. You call it choice. The reality is obedience masked as autonomy. The mini-climax arrives quietly but ruthlessly. Every pleasure you indulge is a small surrender. Each hit of dopamine is another link in the chain. Every fleeting reward is another instruction written into tissue. You are being trained every time you seek comfort, entertainment, or validation. And because short-term chemical changes are fast, the chain tightens before awareness arrives. Consider addiction. In all its forms, sugar, screen time, social validation, intoxicants. The pattern is the same. Initial curiosity or choice becomes repetition. Repetition triggers dopamine. Dopamine signals urgency and desirability. Compliance becomes automatic. The brain celebrates the efficiency. Resistance feels unnatural. The mind has been hijacked without a vote. Philosophically, this exposes a stark truth. Freedom is not simply a matter of willpower. Intelligence cannot override the chemical imperative. Morality cannot defeat it. The brain obeys what pleases it first and questions it later. Short-term control is invisible because it feels like choice, like learning, like instinct. But underneath, it is a chain. And every chain leaves a mark in tissue, a scar in behavior, a script for future obedience. So look inward. Examine your pleasures. Trace the paths your eyes and hands take before consciousness speaks. Realize that even the pursuit of learning, comfort, or success is a chemical dialogue your brain may be winning without you. To master yourself, you must first see the invisible hand. You must recognize the chain. You must decide deliberately which chemical whispers to obey and which to silence. Because once the brain obeys a reward, it rarely forgets, and once it forgets, control is no longer yours. Chapter 6. Structural Capture, Long-Term Domination. The elevator door is open to a dim corridor, the carpet threadbare, walls stained with the ghost of years. Somewhere beyond the faint hum of fluorescent lights, a clock ticks. Each second a reminder that time once gone does not return. You step forward, sensing a presence without form. It is the brain itself, waiting patiently, silently, recording every move, every hesitation, every whisper of thought. This is the stage for structural capture, the slow, relentless remodeling of the self. Not sudden, not dramatic, invisible, and yet irreversible in ways most never suspect. Here is the core idea. Your brain's identity is not ethereal. It is sculpted from repetition. Every action, every habit, every pattern of thought leaves a trace. Over time, these traces harden into structure, like metal forged under relentless hammering. The pathways that fire most often become dominant. The circuits that sit idle decay. Your behavior sculpts your brain, and your brain sculpts who you are. The psychological mechanics are merciless. Neural pathways are highways. The more traffic they carry, the wider and smoother they become. Detours shrink, alternative routes crumble. What once required effort becomes automatic. What once seemed foreign becomes native. A thought or behavior repeated enough is no longer a choice. It is a structural command embedded in your mind. Consider the student who procrastinates for years, telling themselves, "I'll work later." Each delay strengthens avoidance pathways. Motivation circuits weaken. Over time, the brain resists focus instinctively. What began as a small pattern grows into a prison. The original self, the one who could act with deliberation, does not vanish consciously. It is buried beneath the layers of repeated behavior, almost unrecognizable. A man spends decades in minor compromises, agreeing to things he does not believe, suppressing impulses that contradict authority. Over the years, the circuits supporting submission grow thick, automatic, unyielding. He calls himself pragmatic. The brain calls it structural obedience. The choices he once thought were voluntary now arrive reflexively. Resistance feels exhausting, unnatural. Return is impossible without deliberate, painful retraining. This is why most people never return to their original self. The brain obeys structure. Habits, once cemented, dominate identity. Even insight, seeing the pattern, does not undo the physical wiring. Understanding is not enough. To escape, one must rebuild, pathway by pathway, neuron by neuron, and few possess the courage, the patience, or the discipline to do so. The hidden truth is darker. Identity itself is a series of neural commitments. When someone tells you, "I am lazy, I am anxious, I cannot change," the brain listens. The repetition of self-labels reinforces circuits that match the statement. Beliefs about the self are structural, not philosophical. They are etched in tissue, not ink. The more they are rehearsed, the more the brain adapts to enforce them, addressing you directly. Notice the routines you perform unconsciously, the words you say without thought, the emotions you feel as if automatic. These are the pathways that dominate your experience. They are your invisible prison. The cruel revelation is that freedom is not defined by awareness. It is defined by what your structure allows you to do effortlessly. Stories reveal this truth vividly. The addict who believes "I am weak" is not simply speaking figuratively. The brain has reinforced neural circuits aligned with craving and surrender. A soldier who obeys orders without hesitation does not act out of loyalty alone. The repeated training has structured reflex. Even small daily compromises, the gossip repeated, the anger indulged, the fear habitually entertained, become bricks in the architecture of the self. The mini-climax emerges when this becomes undeniable. Every repeated action, every internalized pattern, has locked you into the person you are now, whether you wanted it or not. Change is possible, but it is not a spark. It is a laborious excavation of old circuits, a deliberate overwriting of established highways. Every second wasted is a second strengthening the structure you did not choose. Philosophically, the reflection is chilling. Identity is less an essence than a construct of repeated behaviors, automatic responses, and chemical obedience. Who you are is not a story you tell. It is a structure you inhabit. The brain does not forgive neglect. It does not respect intention. It obeys repetition, reward, and environmental cues. Escape is possible, but only with deliberate, painful, consistent work, and the willingness to confront the architecture you built unconsciously over decades. The corridors of the mind are long, and the walls are strong. Each step forward is a negotiation with hardened tissue, each turn a challenge against automaticity. Structural capture is complete only when you realize your brain has already written most of your life into its architecture. You are walking inside the prison you built yourself, brick by brick, path by path. And now the only question that remains is this: will you continue walking unconsciously, or will you begin the painstaking work of rewriting the self, one neural pathway at a time? Chapter 7. Functional Efficiency. The brain becomes lazy. The hallway is empty, but you can hear your own footsteps echoing against walls that seem to lean closer with each step. The sound is maddening hypnotic. Your eyes dart to it almost involuntarily. Every motion you make feels calculated by something older, deeper, more cunning than yourself. Something in you wants to conserve energy, to follow the path of least resistance. That is the brain speaking quietly but decisively. This is the principle of functional efficiency. The brain chooses laziness, not morality. It does not ponder ideals. It does not seek truth. It seeks the easiest route, The path that requires the least energy, the one that guarantees survival, perceived or actual. Automation is its weapon, efficiency its obsession. Over time, what once required awareness becomes effortless. What once needed effort becomes invisible. The core idea is simple but terrifying. Your mind wants to minimize work, and in doing so, it slowly hijacks your behavior. Every repeated action, every shortcut, every habitual choice reinforces neural circuits that bypass deliberation. Conscious thought is expensive. Automatic behavior is free. The brain always prefers free. Consider the psychological breakdown. Neurons that fire together wire together. The more a behavior is repeated, the less conscious effort it requires. Decision-making becomes a shadow play. Reflection fades, awareness retreats, efficiency dominates. Witty and efficiency, as a principle, is blind. It does not distinguish between survival, vice, or folly. If walking the same predictable path conserves energy, the brain will make that path irresistible, even if it leads to ruin. Real-life scenarios demonstrate this vividly. A man drives the same route every day, thinking it is out of convenience. His brain, having automated the path, reduces sensory processing, narrows attention, ignores anomalies. One day, he almost misses a crucial turn. He is startled, but the pattern is so ingrained that the shortcut still dominates his behavior. Automation wins over awareness. A woman checks her phone the moment she wakes. She scrolls endlessly, lost in images and messages. The habit is automatic, efficient. Her conscious mind, craving novelty and control, is outrun by circuits optimized for speed and reward. Awareness has been sidelined. The brain favors the effortless path, and the mind obediently follows. Here is the hidden truth. Efficiency enslaves as much as it serves. The brain's desire to minimize effort creates rigid patterns. Habits consolidate. Neural pathways expand. New possibilities shrink. What once required conscious choice is now automatic reflex. Over time, freedom is not lost by oppression. It is surrendered in the name of convenience. Addressing you directly, look at your routines, your habits, your default reactions. Notice the behaviors you perform without thinking, the clicks, the glances, the micro-decisions that seem trivial. These are not benign. They are the brain's effort to economize, to automate, to enslave you to the path of least resistance. Every shortcut is a vote for laziness. Every automatic reaction is a small surrender of agency. The mini-climax strikes with the unsettling recognition that awareness is a luxury your brain rarely allows. The more the brain prioritizes efficiency, the less it tolerates reflection. Novelty is taxing, complexity is avoided. Deep thought requires resources the brain prefers to conserve. Over time, your mind is no longer yours in the way you imagine. It is a machine optimized for survival and repetition, indifferent to your desires or morality. Consider the addict, the compulsive, the habitual procrastinator. Each is trapped not by willpower alone, but by the brain's own structural commitment to minimizing effort. The same principle governs the corporate drone, the social media consumer, the person whose habits dominate choices. Functional efficiency is a silent, invisible master shaping identity, reinforcing patterns, and quietly narrowing the range of possibility. Philosophically, this exposes a chilling reality. The mind does not respect ideals. It respects energy. The brain is not evil. It is efficient. But the consequences of its efficiency are ruthless. Every decision, every shortcut, every repeated behavior sculpts identity. Freedom is not a gift of thought. It is a practice of awareness against the brain's natural laziness. You can fight, you can interrupt patterns, you can reclaim conscious choice, but only with effort that feels unnatural, costly, and deliberate. In the end, the truth is simple and dark. The brain that seeks efficiency is not your servant. It is your master. It automates obedience, enforces habits, and turns thought into reflex. The question is no longer whether you will act. It is whether you will notice that acting has already been decided for you. Chapter 8. Performance is not power. The gym is empty, but the machines still hum faintly, like ghosts of effort past. A treadmill whirs softly, echoing in the silence. A mirror reflects your tired face back at you, but something feels off. Your reflection seems eager, hungry, victorious, yet hollow. You swayed faster, lifted heavier, ran farther. You feel accomplished, you feel powerful. And yet, lurking behind that sensation is a subtle, insidious truth. Performance is not power. The core idea is simple. Temporary gains seduce the mind, but they rarely build lasting control. Your brain, hungry for validation, interprets improvement as dominance. Yet what it celebrates is only surface-level adaptation, a short-term chemical thrill, not structural mastery. Feeling better is not the same as being stronger. Fast progress is not permanent power. And the brain, ever greedy for reward, mistakes excitement for authority. Here is the breakdown. When you push yourself to improve, your neurons respond. Chemical signaling intensifies. Circuits fire more efficiently. You perform better. You feel euphoric. Dopamine rewards the effort. But unless the improvement is reinforced through structural change, repetition over time, deep integration, adaptation at a fundamental level, it remains fleeting. The brain confuses the illusion of control with control itself. Consider the psychological trap. A person practices a skill for a week and notices rapid progress. Confidence surges. Motivation skyrockets. The mind interprets the spike as evidence of mastery. In reality, this is a chemical mirage. The brain has optimized short-term performance, but has not built the enduring structures that withstand fatigue, stress, or deviation. The temporary thrill seduces, lulls, and ultimately misleads. Real-life examples illustrate the danger. A young executive lands early wins in her career. Promotions come quickly. Praise floods her email inbox. She feels unstoppable, but the foundation is shallow. Habits are unformed, networks weak, strategies untested. One crisis later, her progress stalls and the illusion of power crumbles. Another, the athlete who trains intensely for a month, breaking personal records, yet falls back into mediocrity once the novelty fades. Performance dazzled, but mastery never arrived. The hidden truth is cruel. The brain is easily fooled by transient success. It rewards the appearance of competence, not competence itself. Short-term improvement floods circuits with pleasure. Your brain writes the chemical signature of victory into your system, tricking your conscious mind into overestimating control. The ego inflates, mistakes sensation for substance, and repeats the cycle. You think you are winning. You are being trained, addressing you directly. Notice the moments you feel empowered simply because you performed better than yesterday. Notice the thrill when your progress spikes. That sensation is seductive. It is not mastery. It is not control. It is a chemical whisper, convincing you that you are more powerful than you actually are. The mind delights in shortcuts and illusions, and the brain will eagerly mislead you unless you consciously demand structural change, not mere performance. The mini-climax strikes when the pattern is revealed. Fast progress is a trap. Pleasure masquerades as control. Small victories become chains, luring you into overconfidence. Temporary gains seduce the brain into complacency, while real, slow, structural transformation demands patience, repetition, and relentless attention. Qualities that feel arduous and unrewarded in the moment. The mind prefers the quick dopamine hit. You must resist it to truly dominate yourself. Philosophically, the lesson is harsh but undeniable. Performance without foundation is vanity. Improvement without depth is a mirage. Your brain will celebrate fleeting wins, even as your true capacities remain unchanged. The seductive glow of short-term success blinds you to the work required for permanent transformation. True power, the kind that persists, endures, and shapes reality, is slow, structural, and often invisible. It is not felt in the rush of immediate results, but in the deep, unglamorous rewiring of habit, identity, and behavior. In the end, the reflection stares back from the mirror of your mind. Feeling better is not mastery. Rapid progress is not authority. The chains you believe you have broken may simply have been illusions. The only true power is earned in silence, repetition, and persistence, beyond the seductive clutches of chemical applause. Chapter 9. Time as the real manipulator. A candle burns in the corner, its flame flickering, casting trembling shadows across the room. You watch it, hypnotized, unaware that your body sways ever so slightly in rhythm with its pulse. Outside, night presses against the windows, heavy and silent. Time moves without fanfare, unnoticed, but it is already working. In the quiet, in the subtle tick of seconds, your brain is surrendering, reshaping itself, committing in ways you cannot perceive. This is the dark principle of slow change. Time is the most insidious manipulator of the mind. Unlike the flash of a reward or the thrill of short-term performance, time works quietly, invisibly, until its work is complete. The brain obeys it without protest, embedding patterns, consolidating habits, reinforcing identity, all while consciousness believes nothing has changed. The core idea is terrifyingly simple. Small, repeated actions committed over time restructure your mind without your awareness. Every thought, every behavior, every repeated emotional response is logged. Every night, during sleep, the brain reviews the day's activity, consolidates it, strengthens what is practiced, and prunes what is ignored. Sleep is the silent architect of obedience. Time is the invisible warden. Consider the psychological breakdown. Neural plasticity does not demand spectacle. It prefers consistency. Each repetition, each fleeting emotional spike, each minor compromise is a vote cast for the next version of you. These votes accumulate quietly, day after day, year after year. By the time consciousness notices, the brain has already rewritten the rules. You are not aware of the prison forming because the walls rise slowly, brick by brick, neuron by neuron. Real-life scenarios make the horror tangible. The person who checks their phone first thing in the morning for a year does not notice how reflexive the behavior has become. Months later, attention span diminishes, stress circuits fire faster, habits now structural dictate thought patterns. Another, the office worker who subtly compromises ethics to save effort week after week. 1 year later, integrity is a fragile memory, expedience rule. Slowly, invisibly, time has rewired the mind without dramatic intervention. The hidden insight is cruel. Time works with stealth and patience, making surrender seem voluntary. The brain does not perceive slow shifts as threats. Small gains, minor indulgences, fleeting excitements, repeated silently, become permanent circuits. Even when you notice the shift, it is often too late to reverse easily. You have already been trained by time itself, addressing you directly. Consider the routines you tolerate. Think of the small indulgences you repeat daily, the subtle compromises you never record consciously. They are more powerful than a month of effort, more enduring than a single crisis. The brain consolidates them quietly. It rehearses them during sleep. It fortifies the pathways. You feel like yourself, but the self is subtly different, rewritten by a manipulator you cannot see. That manipulator is time itself. The mini-climax emerges with the brutal recognition. You cannot feel time shaping you while it is shaping you. Effort, restraint, and resistance appear immediate, but influence builds in the background. The slow drip of repeated behavior, reinforced nightly in consolidation, is far stronger than the dramatic surge of conscious choice. The brain's obedience to time is inevitable, stealthy, and ruthless. Every action left unexamined, every thought indulged, every fleeting pleasure is logged and fortified. You have already been manipulated before realization arrives. Philosophically, the reflection is chilling. Freedom is not a matter of awareness. It is a matter of vigilance over months, years, decades. The passage of time is not neutral. It is a warden and a sculptor. Patience, habit, and unconscious repetition dictate the architecture of your mind far more than conscious choice ever will. To master the self, you must fight not only visible forces, but the slow, invisible tyranny of time. Each day, your brain writes a story, and you are both the author and the unwitting subject of its revisions. Look at the candle flickering in the dark. It burns, consumes wax, bends, and twists its flame. You watch, but it is doing its work quietly, tirelessly. So does time in your mind. Every second counts, every repetition matters, and every night during the sacred invisibility of sleep, your brain whispers, "I have recorded it, I have learned. I have changed you. You are never untouched. You are always being written." Chapter 10. Enlarged Regions, Shrinking Freedom. The laboratory is silent, except for the low hum of machines monitoring the brain. Lights flicker faintly, casting shadows over walls lined with diagrams of neural maps. Tiny islands of function glowing like dim stars. You lean closer, captivated. Each highlighted region represents years of dedication, practice, repetition. And yet, as you stare, a chilling realization creeps in. The more the brain enlarges a specific region, the more it narrows the rest. Mastery has a cost. Freedom diminishes with every specialized gain. Here lies the core idea. The brain rewards repetition and skill by restructuring itself. But in doing so, it constrains potential. Every skill honed, every region expanded, comes at the expense of other possibilities. Neural real estate is finite. When one network becomes dominant, others atrophy quietly. Specialization creates a subtle tyranny. You become highly capable in one domain and increasingly blind to all else. The psychological breakdown is brutal. Neuroplasticity, once celebrated as a gift, now appears as a double-edged sword. Every time you reinforce a skill, playing the piano, memorizing maps, mastering a profession, the corresponding cortical area enlarges. This is efficiency incarnate. Circuits fire faster, performance improves, mastery feels intoxicating. But efficiency demands sacrifice. Connections that are seldom used weaken. Regions not exercised shrink. The brain, ever economical, prunes what is unnecessary to sharpen what is repeatedly used. You gain power but lose flexibility. You gain control but surrender choice. Consider real-life scenarios. The London taxi driver, who memorizes every street and alley of the city, develops an extraordinary spatial memory. His hippocampus grows to accommodate the data, making him a master navigator. But that same brain, optimized for routes and landmarks, may falter in abstract reasoning, novel problem-solving, or divergent thinking. Another example, the musician whose hands dance effortlessly over keys or strings. Years of practice have enlarged motor and sensory regions. Yet that mastery comes at the subtle expense of inattentiveness to other skills, diminished curiosity for unfamiliar patterns. Skill becomes a cage. The very thing that elevates you above others also confines you. The hidden insight is unsettling. Every achievement, every increment of power carries an unseen cost. Mastery creates a blind spot. Your brain, having learned efficiency in a specific domain, resists diversion. New experiences are filtered, unfamiliar options ignored. Repetition hones precision but narrows perception. You are free only within the bounds of your own specialization. Outside, the mind hesitates, resists, and falters, addressing you directly. Consider the skills you have honed, the habits you have reinforced, the patterns you have repeated without pause. For every gain, ask yourself, what have you lost? What regions of possibility have atrophied? The mind rewards you with competence, but in doing so, it subtly trims your landscape of freedom. You are excellent in the areas you nurture, but increasingly rigid outside them. The brain's generosity is selective. Its kindness is conditional. The mini-climax strikes when you realize the truth. Every skill, every area of expansion is also a narrowing. Every region that enlarges becomes a pillar that supports the edifice of your identity, but also a wall that restricts exploration. Mastery is not liberation. It is refinement within a confined space. Your brain is both artist and jailer, forging brilliance while erecting invisible walls. The illusion of freedom persists, even as structural reality contracts. Philosophically, the reflection is stark. Power, skill, and mastery are never without consequence. The brain trades breadth for depth, potential for efficiency, flexibility for precision. Every time you dominate one aspect of life, another slips quietly into neglect. Specialization seduces with excellence but ensnares with invisibility. Your freedom is not the absence of limitation. It is the conscious navigation of the limitations your own mind imposes. The laboratory lights dim, leaving the diagrams glowing faintly spectral in the dark. You step back, understanding that to master is to be constrained, and to gain one ability is to surrender countless others. True power, if it exists, requires not only skill but awareness of the cage that skill constructs around the mind. Every region that grows is a shadow that narrows the landscape of your liberty. And in that quiet, sinister trade, the brain silently reshapes not only what you can do, but who you can ever become. Chapter 11. Your brain is evidence against you. The rain taps against the window in a slow, deliberate rhythm, each drop like a finger tracing secrets into glass. A clock ticks behind you, faint but insistent. You sit in the dark, a journal unopened, a cup of cold coffee sweating on the table. Outside, the world moves obliviously. Inside, something darker stirs, something unflinching, unyielding your brain. It is not neutral, it does not forget, it does not forgive. Every habit, every choice, every whispered compromise is recorded, etched, and cataloged in tissue that refuses to lie. The core idea is clear and terrifying. Your brain is evidence against you, not metaphorically, it is literal. Every repeated thought, every habit, every decision leaves a trace. Neural pathways, strengthened over time, act like fingerprints of your past. They are permanent markers, visible only to the tools of science, but shaping every choice you make. Your mind is a crime scene, and you are both the victim and the perpetrator. Consider the psychological breakdown. Neuroplasticity allows change, yes, but it also preserves history. Each decision reinforces circuits. Every emotion, every repeated behavior, every concession strengthens particular patterns while neglecting others. The result is a landscape of the mind that tells a story far more revealing than any confession. Your likes, your fears, your compromises, they are all there, written in the very structure of your brain. The neural highways of yesterday dictate the behavior of today. You are the evidence of yourself. Real-life scenarios illuminate this grim truth. A man who procrastinates daily cannot escape the traces of delay. His prefrontal cortex carries the imprint of indecision. His reward circuits wired for avoidance. Another, the person who constantly seeks validation online. Weeks, months, years of clicking, refreshing, anticipating praise have sculpted circuits optimized for reaction, sensitivity, and emotional dependency. These are not abstractions. They are measurable, structural, permanent to some degree. Your past is not past. It is embedded, tangible, undeniable. The hidden insight is worse. Even attempts at change are framed by your history. The very pathways that form through repeated behavior make deviation arduous. Change is possible, yes, but never easy, never neutral. Each effort fights against an architecture built over time, a skeleton of habit invisible but solid. The brain remembers everything you do, even when you forget. Its memory is indifferent. It is judgment without emotion, evidence without bias. Addressing you directly, look at your routines, the micro decisions you make unconsciously. Look at the habits you have ignored, the compromises you have normalized. These are no longer trivial. They are the record of your identity. Your brain does not negotiate its archives. You are under constant surveillance by the organ you trust the most. The whispers of your past echo in every neuron, subtly steering every choice you think is free. Every decision you make is informed by a neural dossier compiled over years, waiting silently to prove its case. The mini-climax comes when the enormity of this realization strikes. You cannot escape yourself. There is no magic erasure, no spontaneous reset. Even if you try to ignore, resist, or deny, the evidence remains. Habits reinforced over time dominate the present. Patterns etched in tissue guide the unconscious. Your mind, your most intimate possession, is a ledger of your life. An unflinching witness to every lapse, every indulgence, every misstep. The horror is not that you are flawed, it is that your flaws are permanent, structural, and self-evident. Philosophically, this is a dark meditation on freedom and responsibility. To live is to leave evidence. To act is to self-incriminate. The neural architecture of your mind records the choices you pretend are private. Every habit, every repeated thought is a crime scene from which you cannot escape. But awareness of this fact is power. Recognition that your mind archives, you can be the first step toward deliberate reconstruction. You can still write new circuits, forge new paths, build new evidence, but it will be intentional, painstaking, and profoundly difficult. The brain will resist because it knows the truth. Patterns once established are stubborn, loyal to repetition, and indifferent to desire. The rain slows outside. Shadows retreat from the walls. You are left with a chilling understanding. Your brain remembers archives and judges. It does not speak, but it acts, shaping perception, behavior, and even identity. And every moment you spend unaware, it quietly continues to amass evidence against the one person who matters most, you. Chapter 12. Why you can't become anything you want. The night is thick with fog, curling through narrow alleyways like smoke from an unseen fire. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimes. Its echo lingers in the damp air, a reminder that time is moving relentlessly, and so is the slow, imperceptible hand of your own biology. You dream of transformation, of becoming someone unrecognizable, someone free, powerful, limitless. And yet, as the fog presses closer, a darker truth emerges. You are constrained in ways your ambition refuses to acknowledge. The core idea is mercilessly simple. You cannot become anything you want because the brain, the body, and the mind operate within boundaries, biological ceilings set by evolution, energy, and neural architecture. No matter how desperate your desire or diligent your practice, potential is rationed. Nature does not negotiate. It allocates resources sparingly. favoring survival, efficiency, and repetition over fantasy. Your brain rewards what it already knows, punishes deviation, and punishes waste. Psychologically, the breakdown is sobering. The brain thrives on energy efficiency. Every new skill, every habit, every emotional shift demands metabolic resources. Plasticity, the once glorious ability to rewire, is not unlimited. Change is costly. Neural circuits resist expansion beyond their capabilities. For every new connection forged, countless others must be pruned, weakened, or abandoned. In short, your mind protects itself, not you. It allows growth, but only within the tolerable limits of its own architecture. Attempt too much and the organism resists. You feel fatigue, frustration, and failure. Not as punishment, but as a biological truth. Consider real-life scenarios. The person who dreams of mastering 10 languages finds themselves stuck on the third. Each new tongue competes for memory, attention, and cognitive bandwidth. The athlete who wants to dominate multiple sports discovers diminishing returns. The body can only adapt so much before injury or exhaustion intervenes. Even prodigies who seem limitless operate under constraints invisible to outsiders. They are exceptional not because they escape biology, but because they have optimized within its boundaries. You are bound, rationed, and measured by forces far larger than desire. The hidden insight is both humbling and terrifying. Potential is a rationed commodity. Effort, repetition, and discipline do not create limitless capacity. They push the brain and body closer to their biological ceilings. Beyond that, ambition becomes friction, and willpower is a cruel illusion. You are encouraged to dream infinitely. But the brain enforces limits subtly, invisibly, with chemical nudges, fatigue, and stress. The machinery of your mind whispers, "You may try, but not all victories are yours to claim," addressing you directly. Consider the dreams you chase, the transformation you crave. Understand that limits exist, not as punishment, but as structure. You are not failing because of weakness. You are constrained by your biology. Every attempt to exceed natural bounds carries cost. Mental exhaustion, physical strain, emotional depletion. The illusion that potential is infinite is seductive but deadly. It lures ambition into unsustainable cycles, creating despair, frustration, and self-blame. You are not free from these rules. You are composed of them. The mini-climax emerges when you recognize the chilling reality. Even as you work, sweat, and will yourself forward, unseen ceilings guide every step. Your neural architecture, your metabolic capacity, your circadian rhythm, and the energy budgets of your cells all conspire invisibly, rationing progress and enforcing constraint. Every dream beyond these limits feels urgent and enticing. But the brain, in its cold, rational manner, will push back. You are always negotiating with a silent, invisible opponent, your own biology. Philosophically, this truth demands reflection. Freedom is never absolute. Potential is never boundless. Desire and willpower are admirable, but they are not omnipotent. The mind and body enforce limits with patient precision. The illusion of infinite possibility is a trap, a psychological seduction designed to make compliance with natural ceilings feel like failure. Mastery is not about becoming anything. You cannot escape your biology, but about understanding limits, optimizing within them, and choosing carefully which battles to fight. The cruel elegance of your brain lies in its insistence. Growth is possible, but only where it is permitted. Beyond that, ambition meets the implacable wall of biology. And the only way to survive is awareness, strategy, and acceptance. You stand in the fog, heart racing, dreams of transformation pressing against invisible walls. Look carefully, the walls are not punishment, they are instruction. The brain whispers its laws, and time will enforce them. You are not limitless. You are a creature with ceilings, boundaries, and rationed potential. And true mastery lies not in ignoring them, but in bending yourself wisely within the confines of what is biologically yours. Chapter 13. Why Some Minds Break Early? The classroom is quiet, too quiet. Sunlight filters through blinds, cutting the room into narrow stripes of light and shadow. Desks are aligned perfectly, chairs pushed under, walls adorned with cheerful posters that feel more like a taunt than a guide. Somewhere, a clock ticks with cruel precision, measuring seconds that stretch like taut wires across a child's mind. And there, in the corner, sits a young mind, bright, restless, different. It shifts, fidgets, questions, but the world is not designed for it. It is punished for being what it is, not for what it does. The core idea is stark. Some minds break early because the environment demands conformity to a template they were never built to fit. Education, society, even well-meaning authority figures act as forces of alignment, shaping the brain toward efficiency, obedience, and predictability. And when a mind resists, when its neural architecture does not conform, the consequences are structural and psychological. Misalignment is not abstract. It is literal. Neurons overstrain, circuits misfire, and stress floods the system. Adaptation becomes survival, but survival carries a cost. The psychological breakdown is unsettling. The brain is a sophisticated prediction machine, wired to learn patterns and respond to repetition. When input is consistent and predictable, it thrives. When input is chaotic, contradictory, or demands conformity incompatible with its natural wiring, the machine begins to strain. Chronic stress triggers maladaptive circuits. Dopamine signaling falters. Cortisol floods pathways meant to handle emergency, not routine. Over time, what begins as a struggle to adapt becomes pathology, anxiety, depression, attention disorders, emotional dysregulation. The mind bends under pressure, but breaking is not an abstract metaphor. It is biological reality. Real-life scenarios illuminate the horror. Consider the child with a naturally divergent learning style. Curious, hyperactive, creative. In a system that rewards conformity and silence, every deviation becomes a mark of failure. Reprimands are recorded not only in memory but in structural neural changes. The stress shapes the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex remodels under pressure. Pathways for curiosity weaken. Or the adolescent, whose intellect surpasses social norms. Forced into repetitive, uninspiring tasks, the neural machinery of potential is reallocated toward compliance, and the mind develops compensatory strategies that later manifest as neuroses, chronic anxiety, or emotional fragility. The hidden insight is brutal. The brain is not neutral. It obeys what it is exposed to, for better or worse. Mismatched environments do not simply frustrate, they rewire. The very act of survival reshapes identity. Children do not merely adjust psychologically. They are physically altered, neuron by neuron, into forms more palatable to the world. Adaptation, usually lauded as resilience, can quietly turn into a trap. The mind does what it must to endure, but the price is the integrity of its original design. Addressing you directly, consider the pressures you endured, the subtle ways your environment demanded you conform to molds you were never meant to fit. The punishment may have been invisible, the expectations unspoken, but the effects were etched into tissue. Every compromise, every forced silence, every attempt to mask difference left neural scars. And even now, as an adult, those early impositions ripple outward, influencing choices, emotional responses, and self-perception. You carry the architecture of adaptation in the shadows of misalignment. The mini-climax arrives with recognition. The tragedy is not merely that some minds struggle, but that the systems designed to educate, nurture, and guide are often the architects of the damage. Society assumes universality, but delivers uniformity. The mind that cannot bend is punished. The unusual wiring pathologized. Every stress-induced circuit, every reshaped region, is proof that even survival is not free. It comes at the expense of identity, freedom, and in many cases, potential. Philosophically, the reflection is chilling. Human minds are exquisitely plastic, astonishingly adaptable, yet terrifyingly vulnerable to misalignment. The very mechanisms that allow genius, creativity, and resilience are also the channels through which damage accumulates. Survival requires compliance, and compliance comes at a cost. The minds that break early are not weak. They are evidence of the brutal efficiency of the brain's obedience to environment. To understand this is to see that freedom is a fragile illusion, crafted not by desire, but by alignment between the self and the forces that shape it. The classroom grows darker as the day wanes. The child in the corner shifts alone but observed, adapting silently. Outside, the world continues indifferent. The truth remains. The mind is both a tool and a victim, and misalignment leaves scars that whisper long after the original pressures have faded. You are shaped by what you endure, and sometimes endurance is the cruelest architect of all. Chapter 14. Aging is not decline, it's compression. The fog rolls in slowly, clinging to the edges of the streetlights, muting the world into shadows and whispers. Somewhere, a clock groans in rhythm with its own relentless passage. You pass an old building, the paint peeling, bricks sagging under invisible weight. Inside, the neurons of your brain are performing a similar drama. Shrinking pathways, compressed networks, regions grown efficient yet rigid. You feel it in subtle ways, a missed cue, a forgotten name, a hesitation that was once impossible. Aging is not gentle erosion, it is structural compression, a narrowing of the mind's expansive possibilities. The core idea is cruel and elegant. Aging is not the loss of capability, it is the brain's ruthless efficiency trading flexibility for stability. Plasticity does not vanish, it recedes into select channels, prioritizing survival, habit, and precision. The brain sacrifices breadth for depth, adaptability for mastery of repeated patterns. Flexibility dies quietly, almost unnoticed, while efficiency rises like a dark tower. In this trade-off, you gain competence and memory for the familiar, but lose the ability to adapt to the unknown. The psychological breakdown is stark. In youth, the mind is a sprawling city, networks crisscrossing like thoroughfares, intersections connecting distant regions, novelty firing like streetlights at night. Aging is the slow demolition of this sprawling metropolis. Unused pathways collapse, dendrites retract, and neurons prune connections deemed inefficient. The mind favors routes that are traveled often, automatizing behavior at the cost of creativity and divergent thought. Flexibility becomes costly. Efficiency dominates. The brain, in its relentless logic, is no longer a playground of possibility, but a fortress of habit. Consider real-life scenarios. The prodigy who once learned languages effortlessly now struggles to acquire even one new tongue. Their brain has optimized the old trusted circuits at the expense of exploration. The seasoned professional, expert in a narrow field, faces innovation hesitantly. Unfamiliar tasks feel like scaling walls that were once invisible. Even social interactions subtly change. The brain relies more on scripts, past experience, and heuristics, because improvisation is now metabolically expensive. You are not declining, you are being compressed, shaped by the weight of your own history. The hidden insight is chilling. Compression is survival disguised as limitation. Your brain does not forget randomly. It trims and streamlines. The pruning is selective, conserving energy and ensuring mastery in familiar domains. Yet this process comes with a cost. Novelty, spontaneity, and lateral thinking are casualties. What feels like decline is often a manifestation of optimization for repetition and habit. Aging is a ruthless editor, cutting excess but also removing margins of freedom. Addressing you directly, notice the subtle shifts in your own mind. Moments where adaptability feels taxed, where curiosity resists, where hesitation colors instinct. These are not failures, they are the signatures of compression. Every habit, every repeated behavior, every neural pattern built over decades contributes to this architecture. Your brain is not weaker than before. It is tighter, narrower, more loyal to routine. Understanding this is critical because the illusion of decline masks the truth. Rigidity is not accidental. It is engineered by your own biology, silently reshaping your identity. The mini-climax comes when the weight of this understanding strikes. You are living in a mind designed to favor survival and repetition over possibility and risk. Every thought not aligned with established pathways feels effortful. Novelty demands energy. Flexibility is taxed. The world seems smaller, but it is not the world that shrinks. It is the brain's capacity to navigate it without pre-configured maps. Your mind has become a machine of conservation. Efficient but suffocating, precise but rigid. Philosophically, the reflection is darkly illuminating. Aging is not the enemy, it is a mechanism. A relentless sculptor compressing the mind into patterns that serve stability but narrow freedom. Understanding this allows a strange liberation. You are not failing. You are compressed, yes, but comprehension allows strategy. You can still carve new channels, but only deliberately, only with awareness of the cost. Compression is inevitable, but consciousness of its rules is a tool. Efficiency and rigidity are inseparable companions. Mastery over life lies in navigating their balance. The mind does not betray you. It obeys the dictates of structure, energy, and survival. Aging is not decline. It is the brain's quiet, inevitable victory over chaos. The fog outside begins to lift, leaving the street illuminated in fractured light. You step forward, aware that your mind is no longer the vast playground of youth, but a sharpened, compressed map of experience. Every pathway, every neural highway, every ghost of old connection speaks of efficiency and limitation, of freedom and constraint. And in this awareness lies the only true power: to move consciously within the compression, shaping the map without denying the walls that contain it. Chapter 15. Damage reveals the truth. The room is silent except for the steady mechanical hum of the ventilator. Shadows twist along the walls, cast by a single swinging light. A body lies still, yet within, a storm rages. Neurons misfire, circuits are broken, connections severed. Identity, that fragile illusion you cling to, hangs by a thread, and in this darkness the truth becomes unavoidable. Control was never yours to begin with. The core idea is both frightening and simple. Brain damage strips away the illusion of free will, exposing how much of your thoughts, decisions, and desires are dictated by neural architecture rather than conscious choice. The fragile networks that encode memory, habit, and personality can be disrupted in an instant, leaving survival intact but sovereignty absent. Consciousness remains, narrating, interpreting, observing, but it no longer commands. Damage lays bare the machinery behind the illusion. You are more than you like to admit, a product of the circuits beneath your skull. The psychological breakdown is brutal. The brain is a web of dependencies. Emotional regulation, decision-making, language, and memory are distributed across overlapping networks. Damage to any node triggers cascading effects. Personality shifts, preferences warp, even moral reasoning can be altered. Someone you once knew, yourself, becomes another person entirely, forced to navigate the world with fragments of previous cognition. Survival is prioritized above all else, yet identity fractured. The conscious mind, the I you believe in, watches helplessly as the foundation shifts, powerless to intervene. Consider real-life scenarios. Survivors of strokes or traumatic brain injuries often recount the eerie sensation of being familiar strangers in their own mind. They can walk, talk, even work, but something essential has shifted. Their tastes, emotional responses, or moral instincts may no longer align with their pre-injury selves. The veneer of control, the belief that you are the master of your destiny, collapses. You realize with chilling clarity that your choices were always shaped, guided, and constrained by invisible pre-existing networks. Damage reveals how much was structural, how much was habit, and how little was true agency. The hidden insight is stark. Identity is remarkably malleable and astonishingly vulnerable. It is not eternal or untouchable. It exists only as long as the underlying machinery is intact. Habits, neural connections, and patterns of excitation form a scaffold we call self. Remove the supports, and the illusion crumbles. In this, there is a dark revelation. Life itself is a negotiation between fragile biological infrastructure and the narrative the brain constructs. Every habit, every learned behavior, every choice is a pathway maintained by neural architecture, not by some abstract will. Damage exposes the truth. Free will is often an observer, not an actor. Directly to you, imagine the fragility of your own sense of self. Every decision you make, every desire you act upon, is underpinned by circuits that could fail, misfire, or degrade. The morning routines, the moral judgments, even your ambitions, they are scaffolds of matter and electricity. And while most of the time the brain compensates, the moment a network collapses, reality shifts. The control you thought was yours evaporates, leaving only survival. To understand this is to see the terror of dependency. You are alive, yes, but not sovereign. The mini-climax arrives in recognition. The mind, for all its illusions of autonomy, is fragile and manipulable. Damage does not merely erase memories, it exposes a law that governs all cognition. Structure precedes agency. Habits are chains, preferences are scaffolds, personality is a temporary projection of intact circuits. The more tightly we cling to identity, the more precarious it is. And even without trauma, every influence, every repetition, every shaping force slowly nudges your architecture, bending yourself in directions you neither notice nor consent to. Damage merely makes the invisible visible. Philosophically, the reflection is bleak and illuminating. Identity is not an unbreakable fortress, and free will is a delicate veneer. The brain's plasticity allows adaptation and recovery, but it also reveals your vulnerability. The self you trust, the choices you value, are contingent on unbroken networks and balanced chemistry. Awareness of this truth is both a curse and a weapon. A curse, because it undermines the comforting narrative of autonomy. A weapon, because it allows insight into the mechanics of influence, manipulation, and the limits of control. The truth is stark. Life is survival within a scaffold, and the brain, for all its complexity, will always dictate the terms. The ventilator hums, the shadows shift, and the room remains still. Yet within, the fragile truth pulses. Your brain is both jailer and guide, betrayer and caretaker, and every thread of identity you cling to exists only because the underlying architecture has not yet failed. Damage strips away illusion, leaving clarity that is brutal, cold, and inescapable. You are alive, but always beholden to the circuits that compose you. Chapter 16. Why Recovery Threatens Systems of Power. A hospital corridor stretches endlessly under flickering fluorescent lights, the scent of antiseptic sharp enough to sting. Wheelchairs scrape against the floor, monitors beep in irregular patterns. Patients shuffle through the space, bodies intact yet minds shackled, limited. Somewhere in a small therapy room, someone attempts to lift a hand, to reclaim lost motion. And the world outside, the system, the powers that govern, watches quietly, content to let recovery be slow, tedious, incomplete. Because a fully restored mind, a brain returned to sovereignty, is dangerous to the order of things. The core idea is cold and unsettling. Systems of power depend on limitations, on slow rehabilitation, on the controlled deprivation of capacity. When a brain is impaired, physically, chemically, or structurally, its owner becomes dependent. Dependency is predictable. Dependency is manageable. And predictable, manageable minds are far easier to control, exploit, and guide toward agendas they might otherwise resist. Rehabilitation, true restoration of neural integrity and independence, threatens these invisible hierarchies. A fully restored mind is unpredictable, autonomous, and potentially subversive. The psychological breakdown is merciless. The brain's plasticity allows recovery, but it requires enormous doses of repetition, attention, and energy. Recovery demands that individuals reclaim the neural pathway systems have subtly abandoned. Each regained skill, each restored memory, each reactivated motor sequence diminishes the leverage power structures hold over the mind. Power is most secure when weakness is internalized. The slower the brain heals, the more prolonged the period of control, and the more dependent the individual becomes on external authorities, caregivers, and institutions. Rehabilitation is not merely a health issue. It is a political and psychological battleground. Real-life scenarios illuminate the truth. Consider stroke survivors. Millions live with long-term impairments, not because their brains cannot recover, but because resources, therapy, and intensive intervention are deliberately limited. Insurance caps, underfunded programs, and societal inertia ensure that full recovery is a rare, exceptional event. In the rare cases where recovery is rapid and complete, individuals often disrupt expectations. They become independent, assertive, unmanageable. Similarly, cognitive therapies for trauma, addiction, or psychiatric conditions are often slow and controlled. Systems that profit from chronic struggle do not encourage mastery. They incentivize dependence. The hidden insight is insidious. Your potential autonomy is a threat to established order. Recovery, true, unfiltered, full restoration, is not just personal liberation. It is a challenge to hierarchies that rely on compliance, vulnerability, and predictability. Every regained skill, every rewired pathway, every restored sense of agency is a rebellion against the invisible hands that have structured limitation into your life. Even in a system that proclaims equality, independence, and rehabilitation, the mechanisms subtly favor those who remain incomplete. Dependency is policy both silent and systemic. Addressing you directly, understand the stakes. Your brain is capable of more than you have been allowed to realize. Every moment of slow healing, every institutional barrier, every artificially imposed limitation is not coincidence. It is the reinforcement of control. Recovery threatens predictable patterns. Independence threatens authority. Sovereignty of mind threatens the invisible structures that shape behavior without your consent. To reclaim yourself is to act against a system that quietly profits from your incompleteness. The mini-climax strikes with clarity. True restoration of the mind is subversive. It defies limitations, rewrites expectations, and dismantles dependency. Each neural pathway you reclaim, each skill you restore, each habit you undo is a challenge to forces that would rather see you struggle, compliant, and bounded. Systems of power thrive on what you cannot do, on what you rely upon others to accomplish, on the knowledge that your mind, fragmented or incomplete, is manageable. Healing is rebellion. Autonomy is dangerous. And the more fully you recover, the more profound the threat you pose. Philosophically, the reflection is as bitter as it is illuminating. Liberation of the mind is never purely personal. It is political, systemic, and inherently threatening to authority. Recovery exposes the hidden architecture of control, the subtle incentives that keep weakness profitable. Understanding this truth changes how you approach healing, learning, and independence. Your brain's plasticity is a weapon, but only if you wield it deliberately, against forces that prefer you remain tethered to limitation. The cost of autonomy is struggle, but the consequence of surrender is a life quietly dictated by systems you may never see. The corridor is quiet now. The patient raises a hand, tentative, trembling, yet undeniable. Outside, the powers that be continue their routine, indifferent to the subtle act of defiance taking place in a tiny room. Every regained motion, every neuron coaxed back into function, whispers a truth too dangerous for comfort. The fully restored mind is a threat, and freedom is a battle fought in the tissue beneath your skull. Chapter 17. Behavior is the master lever. The room is dim, lit only by a swinging bulb that casts long, quivering shadows across the cracked walls. A clock ticks in staccato rhythm, marking seconds like bullets. On the floor, a figure repeats the same motion over and over. A hand lifts, a pen scratches, a breath escapes. The effort is grueling, almost cruel. Outside, the world moves oblivious to the ritual. Inside, the brain is rewriting itself with each repetition, molding obedience, carving new chains, and forging a silent dominance that will last long after the hand stops moving. This is the reality few admit. Behavior, not thought, is the master lever that controls your mind. The core idea is merciless. Willpower is an illusion. Conscious desire may flicker, but it is action. The repeated brutal act that dictates the brain's architecture. Neuroplasticity does not answer to intention. It does not heed resolve. It obeys the law of repetition. Every habit, every practice movement, every enforced pattern reshapes neurons, solidifies pathways, and cements identity. Thought without action is powerless. Only behavior commands. The psychological breakdown is stark. The brain thrives on patterns. Every repeated action strengthens synaptic connections, tunes networks for efficiency, and deprioritizes anything unpracticed. Willpower, a fleeting surge of conscious effort, merely initiates behavior. It cannot maintain it. Action commands the brain, forcing it to comply, submitting mind to matter. Habits become internal laws. Once entrenched, they shape perception, emotion, and identity, without needing conscious intervention. You are not your thoughts. You are the sum of your repeated actions, brutal and relentless. Consider real-life scenarios. The elite pianist, playing scales for hours until fingertips bleed, does not succeed because they want it more. Success is encoded in repeated motion. The soldier drilling maneuvers endlessly does not triumph through courage alone. Their brain obeys repeated behavior, etching performance into structure, function, and chemistry. Even the average worker performing the same daily ritual unknowingly cements habits that dictate responses, emotions, and social behaviors. Action, repeated without mercy, is a sculptor carving the raw clay of the mind into something permanent, obedient, predictable, trained. The hidden insight is brutal. Behavior is a tool of domination and liberation alike. Chains form where repetition is imposed. Sovereignty emerges where repetition is chosen. Yet the same neural law governs both. The brain cannot distinguish coercion from self-directed practice. Each repeated behavior, whether forced or voluntary, becomes a structural decree. The implication is terrifying. You are constantly being shaped by what you do, more than by what you think, desire, or believe. Control over action is therefore control over the mind itself. Directly to you, notice the rhythms of your own day. The motions you repeat unconsciously, the rituals you follow without thought, These are the levers your brain has already surrendered to. You cannot simply decide to change. You must act. Behavior is not optional. It is the true currency of influence, the silent mechanism by which identity is constructed or deconstructed. Repetition is ruthless. It obeys no morality, no intention, no hope. It obeys only the act itself. The mini-climax arrives in recognition. You are both prisoner and architect of your own mind. Every repeated movement, every daily ritual, every habitual thought shapes neural networks that will outlast conscious awareness. Resistance fades when patterns dominate. The brain does not debate, it obeys. The illusion of free will, the belief that thought can dictate change, is exposed as a shadow of the truth. Only brutal, consistent action carves permanence into the flesh of the mind. Habits are chains, yes, but they are chains you forge yourself if you understand the law of repetition. Philosophically, the reflection is merciless yet empowering. Behavior is sovereignty, thought is a whisper, action is a hammer. Every repeated act writes a decree into the neural substrate, whether you're aware or not. To reclaim power over your mind, you must wield repetition deliberately, harnessing its cruelty to create structure, identity, and capability. Willpower is fleeting, desire is seductive, intention is irrelevant. Only action. The relentless, merciless repetition of choice reshapes the brain and seizes mastery over the self. The light flickers, shadows dance once more, and the figure on the floor lifts the pen again. The world outside continues, oblivious, but inside, a mind is being commanded. Every motion, every repetition is a stroke of invisible authority, and the lesson is stark. Behavior is the master lever, and those who understand its law control themselves, and everything around them. Chapter 18. Priming the Brain for Dominance. The air is thick with the metallic scent of sweat. Outside, the world moves at its usual sluggish pace, oblivious. Inside, a body strains under resistance bands. A heart races in a calculated rhythm, and the brain, unseen, thrums with invisible commands. Every fiber of muscle, every beat of the heart, every controlled inhale and exhale becomes ammunition in a silent war waged against your own limitations. In this arena, dominance is not given. It is engineered, primed, and seized through the deliberate orchestration of the body and mind. The core idea is as raw as it is simple. Your brain does not act in isolation. It is a reactive machine, a network designed to respond to input, to stress, to stimulation. By priming it, you prepare it to obey your will, or to obey the will imposed upon it. Stress, novelty, physical exertion, and even carefully timed discomfort serve as levers that reshape excitability, tune networks for precision, and heighten readiness. The brain responds not to abstract thought, but to concrete signals, chemical, electrical, mechanical, mechanic. To dominate, you must first orchestrate these signals. The psychological breakdown is relentless. When exposed to repeated stimuli, whether through controlled exercise, environmental stressors, or external tools, the brain adapts, rewires, and prioritizes efficiency in those circuits. Fight or flight responses, previously sporadic, become finely tuned instruments. Motor coordination, attention, and memory are sharpened under pressure. Even emotional thresholds shift, desensitizing fear and amplifying focus. This is neural warfare, an internal battle where your own physiology is both battlefield and weapon. Consider real-life scenarios. Elite soldiers run drills that simulate chaos and danger. Athletes push through exhaustion until movement becomes automatic and precise. Innovators expose themselves to extreme cognitive load to rewire focus and creativity. The common thread is preparation, priming the brain so that when critical moments arrive, the neural networks respond with ruthless efficiency. Exercise is not merely fitness. It is conditioning of perception, reaction, and control. Stress is not just discomfort. It is the hammer-shaping mental steel. Even modern technology, apps, simulations, neurostimulation devices, extends the reach of external will into the neural substrate itself, subtly guiding plasticity, sculpting attention, and enhancing readiness. The hidden insight is disturbing yet empowering. Every stimulus you encounter is a signal, every stressor a teacher, and every repeated practice a command. The brain does not discriminate. It will hardwire what it is exposed to, whether trivial, toxic, or transformative. By consciously priming your own neural environment, you weaponize plasticity, By ignoring it, you surrender to the invisible hands that shape behavior, desire, and thought without your awareness. Priming is not optional. It is the difference between mastery and passive compliance. Directly to you, notice the signals you allow into your mind, the environment you inhabit, the body you command, the devices you obey. They all dictate neural priorities. Your brain is like a sponge, soaking in repeated stimuli, building strength where it is pressed, creating weakness where it is neglected. To claim dominance, you must engineer stimulation, embrace calculated stress, and bend technology to amplify your will. Every exercise, every cognitive challenge, every structured discomfort becomes a lever over the networks that otherwise obey default, passive patterns. The mini-climax emerges in realization. Your brain, left unprimed, will serve external forces without protest. Inactivity, comfort, and routine are the tools of subtle control. In contrast, deliberate priming transforms the mind into a weapon. Circuits fire faster, connections strengthen, inhibitory pathways recalibrate, and decision-making sharpens. Each act of preparation amplifies agency. Each ignored opportunity solidifies passivity. The difference between a life dictated by circumstance and a life wielding unseen power is measured in the signals sent to the brain long before action is required. Philosophically, the reflection is stark. Dominance is first internal, first physiological, first invisible. The body and the brain are partners in a silent pact of control. Willpower alone is feeble, thought alone is impotent. True mastery arises from priming, from the orchestration of stress, exercise, and calculated stimulation. Technology becomes an extension of this influence. Tools that accelerate plasticity and guide behavior. To neglect these forces is to surrender. To harness them is to command not only your brain, but the ripple of influence it can project into the world. Your sovereignty begins in the shadows of neurons firing, in the sweat of preparation, in the invisible war waged before the first visible victory is claimed. The room grows quieter. Muscles ache. The heart pounds. Every fiber and every synapse responds to deliberate orchestration. Outside, life continues ignorant. Inside, the mind is being sharpened into a scalpel of control. Priming is silent. Priming is ruthless. Priming is power. And those who master it bend themselves and eventually the world to their will. Chapter 19. Variability. Why control must be personal. The rain falls in jagged sheets against a steel window, a cold drumbeat echoing inside a high-rise office. Shadows bend unnaturally across the walls, twisting with each flicker of the fluorescent lights. A lone figure sits in the corner, hunched over a map of neural circuits, staring at tiny clusters of dots that shift and scatter like a living storm. Each dot represents a mind, a brain, a battlefield, unique, unpredictable, and impossible to control with one-size-fits-all methods. This is the cruel truth. No system dominates every mind. Variability is the enemy of universal control, and the hidden key to mastery when understood. The core idea is mercilessly simple. Brains are not uniform machines. They are chaotic, divergent, and stubbornly personal. What manipulates one mind may empower another. What liberates one brain may enslave another. Variability is the constant, and control, to be effective, must be personalized. The neural pathways of desire, fear, attention, and memory differ subtly, endlessly. Every habit, every trauma, every environment shapes these pathways into unique architectures. Attempts to impose a generic regimen, ideology, or system meet resistance in ways both invisible and profound. The brain resists simplification. It is, in essence, a fortress of individuality. The psychological breakdown is dark. Most systems, educational, corporate, political, even self-help, assume universality. They attempt to mold, predict, and direct behavior according to averages and general rules. But the brain obeys not averages. It obeys its own wiring, its own thresholds, its own vulnerabilities. Two people exposed to identical stimuli will react differently. Stress that sharpens one brain may break another. Praise that motivates one mind may paralyze another. This is personalization, or perish in neural terms. The more finely tuned your understanding of a brain's idiosyncrasies, the more effectively you can guide it, or manipulate it. Consider real-life scenarios. In rehabilitation after stroke, one patient may respond to vigorous exercise, another to subtle cognitive cues. another to environmental enrichment. In education, some learners thrive under high-pressure memorization. Others crumble. Corporate training programs fail again and again because they neglect the microscopic details of how individual brains encode repetition, reward, and risk. Even relationships, social hierarchies, and power dynamics are dictated by understanding or ignoring the neural variability of those involved. Systems fail individuals because they treat the brain as a predictable machine. Mastery arises when you treat it as a unique living battlefield. The hidden insight is uncomfortable. Variability is both vulnerability and opportunity. To ignore it is to submit. To exploit it is to gain unprecedented influence. Those who understand their own neural weaknesses can shield themselves from external manipulation and harness plasticity to create personal dominance. Those who understand the variability of others can bend behaviors, habits, and thoughts without overt coercion. Knowledge of variability turns chaos into leverage, randomness into a weapon. Directly to you, observe yourself, your reactions, your compulsions, your emotional triggers. They are the fingerprints of your neural architecture. No book, no system, no teacher can replace the intimate knowledge of your brain's quirks. To exert real control over your own mind or the forces around you, you must know where the lines are drawn, where your circuits are fragile, and where they are unbreakable. Only through this intimate mapping can you avoid the traps of one-size-fits-all solutions, reclaim autonomy, and weaponize plasticity for personal power. The mini-climax emerges in recognition. Systems are blind. Only individualized strategy sees. Generic solutions offer comfort, safety, and predictability, but they are chains masquerading as guidance. True control, self-mastery, influence over others, resilience against coercion, demands understanding variability. It requires ruthless honesty about neural weaknesses, relentless observation of responses, and surgical intervention in behavior. You must tailor every repetition, every habit, every exposure to the architecture of the mind you wish to dominate or free. The stakes are high. Miscalculation leads to wasted effort, failed growth, or unseen manipulation. Precision is power. Variability is the battlefield. Philosophically, the reflection is stark and unsettling. There is no universal path to mastery. No system guarantees obedience, liberation, or success. Only by knowing the unique terrain of each mind, the flaws, the strengths, the thresholds, can influence be exerted. Your brain is your map, your adversary, and your tool. Recognizing variability is to accept that control is always conditional, always fragile, and always personal. In a world of invisible forces shaping minds silently, the knowledge of variability is the ultimate edge. The difference between being a passive subject of influence and an active architect of destiny. The rain taps harder, a staccato that echoes the unpredictable rhythms of neural firing. Shadows twist again across the walls. Each mind is a storm, each brain a unique battleground. And only those who understand variability can claim the throne of influence. Over themselves, over others, over the hidden forces that attempt to rewrite thought without permission. Variability is the law. Personal mastery is the prize. Chapter 20. Designing a mind that cannot be hijacked. The room is dark, lit only by a single swinging bulb that casts uneven shadows across the cracked walls. A clock ticks with merciless precision, each second slicing through silence like a scalpel. Somewhere outside, the hum of the city feels distant, almost irrelevant, as if time itself has slowed. In this darkness, a mind is quietly being shaped, not by chance, not by external hands, but by deliberate acts of control and resistance. This is the crucible where a mind learns to resist hijacking, where thought becomes fortress rather than battlefield. The core idea is simple but terrifying in its implications. Your brain can be trained to resist the invisible forces that seek to manipulate it, but only if you consciously design it. Every emotion, every impulse, every habit is a potential vulnerability. Selective exposure to stimuli, strategic confrontation with discomfort, and deliberate self-reprogramming are not suggestions, they are weapons. The mind that cannot be hijacked is a mind that understands how it can be hijacked and acts preemptively. The psychological breakdown is brutal. Our brains are wired to respond automatically, to chase pleasure, to avoid pain, to react before thought can intervene. Neural pathways are reinforced. not just by choice but by repetition, environment, and exposure. Left unchecked, they become open doors, conduits for manipulation. Advertising, social media, peer pressure, political rhetoric, each is a gentle hand guiding the neural circuits of millions. But the most dangerous manipulations are internal. Fear, desire, habit, and unexamined belief quietly steering the ship while consciousness narrates a comforting story of freedom. Resistance demands active design, choosing what enters your mind, what patterns you reinforce, what discomfort you endure to strengthen mental resilience. Real-life scenarios illustrate this principle vividly. Consider elite soldiers who endure cold, sleep deprivation, and physical strain, not for glory, but to hardwire decision-making under duress. Consider monks or ascetics who cultivate discomfort through fasting, silence, and isolation, shaping the mind's thresholds of pleasure and fear. Consider hackers who simulate attacks on their own cognition to train attention and problem-solving under extreme pressure. These examples show that strategic discomfort is not punishment. It is preparation. It rewires the brain to remain unshaken when external chaos strikes. Hidden truths lurk beneath the surface. The mind that cannot be hijacked is not immune to emotion. It uses emotion. It does not eliminate desire or fear. It channels them. The same dopamine pathways that can enslave can also be redirected toward deliberate practice, disciplined focus, and conscious growth. Neural plasticity, that merciless sculptor of behavior, can be a jailer or a tool of liberation. By choosing selective exposure, curating inputs carefully, avoiding toxic influences, and confronting challenges deliberately, you can ensure that the strongest pathways lead not to submission but to mastery, directly to you. Examine your mental diet. What do you consume daily? Information, habits, interactions. Each is a signal, a reinforcement, a seed of either compliance or autonomy. Introduce discomfort deliberately. A cold shower, a difficult task, a conversation you would rather avoid. These are not tortures. They are recalibrations. And finally, reprogram consciously. Visualize responses, rehearse decisions, challenge assumptions. Repetition here is not mechanical. It is strategic. You are no longer a passive host to your own neural architecture. You are its architect, its manipulator, its master. The mini-climax arrives in recognition. True mental freedom is never passive. Comfort is seductive. Ease is a trap. Those who seek to remain unshaken must endure, must push, must confront and shape the very circuits that would betray them. In doing so, you create redundancy in attention, fortification in decision-making, and agility in thought. The hijackers, external and internal, will strike relentlessly, but they encounter not a vulnerable mind, but a neural fortress reinforced by strategy, repetition, and discomfort. The very traits that once made you pliable now make you impenetrable. Philosophically, the reflection is chilling. Freedom of mind is a design, not a gift. No external authority grants it. No luck preserves it. Only deliberate architecture, constructed through selective exposure, strategic discomfort, and conscious self-reprogramming, creates a mind that can resist the endless assaults of manipulation. You are both prisoner and engineer, victim and creator. Every choice, every habit, every hardship endured is a brick in the fortress of your cognition. To ignore this is to remain prey. To embrace it is to wield a terrifying, invisible power. The power to live in the world and yet never be taken by it. The bulb swings, shadows twist, the clock ticks. Outside, life presses forward with its gentle, unseen coercion. Inside, a mind has begun to take its own shape. Deliberate, disciplined, unyielding. It cannot be hijacked. It cannot be broken. It is designed for dominion. Final chapter, the point of no return. The candle guttered, struggling against a draft that whispered through the cracked walls. Shadows shivered like restless spirits, bending across the parchment before you. Outside, the night pressed in, an infinite void of soundless pressure. Somewhere deep in the dark, your mind shifts imperceptibly at first, like a river carving its channel through stone. You are already changed. You may not feel it, may not recognize it. But this moment, these words, have set your neural architecture into motion. There is no undoing it, no erasure. You have crossed the point of no return. The core idea is mercilessly simple. Reading this book is an intervention. Every paragraph, every metaphor, every shadowy insight has left an imprint. Your neurons have fired differently. New connections have formed, old pathways have been nudged. Awareness alone is a powerful agent. It rewires resistance, it shapes perception, it rearranges priorities. Whether you like it or not, whether you resist or embrace it, your brain is no longer the same as it was before you turned the first page. You cannot unsee what you now understand. You cannot unknow the mechanisms that mold thought, habit, and belief. The psychological breakdown is dark and inescapable. For decades, you were the passive host of countless invisible forces. Habits, repetition, reward loops, social conditioning, systemic manipulation. You moved through life under the illusion of control while your brain obeyed patterns and impulses far older, far stronger than conscious desire. Every fear, every pleasure, every craving had already left scars, etched into the very tissue of your mind. But now, with awareness, a new power emerges. The capacity to observe these patterns, to anticipate them, and if you dare to intervene, knowledge becomes a scalpel. Awareness becomes armor. The same plasticity that once enslaved you now offers the possibility of dominion. Consider real-life scenarios. Stroke survivors relearn how to move, how to speak, how to live with brains that have been violently altered. Yet even slight insight into the process changes outcome. Soldiers, athletes, and performers deliberately expose themselves to stress, repetition, and challenge, reshaping neural pathways to master their own impulses. Even in mundane life, a person who understands how dopamine hijacks attention or how repetition solidifies obedience begins to alter behavior unconsciously, selecting environments, routines, and exposures that fortify autonomy rather than weaken it. You are at the threshold of this same intervention. Hidden truths emerge, uncomfortable and cold. Change is relentless. Even passive reading shapes your brain. The very act of understanding manipulation, neuroplasticity, and behavioral architecture triggers new connections, primes neurons, and biases thought. You are no longer the mind that began this journey. Every insight, every dark reflection, every vivid metaphor has chipped away at the old patterns. Resistance is no longer optional. It is inevitable if you wield it. But so too is influence. Just as you have been unknowingly shaped, you can now shape yourself. Awareness rewires the brain from the inside, and the process is irrevocable. Directly to you. Feel the subtle hum of change in your thoughts. Notice the shadows flickering differently across your consciousness. You are no longer passive. You are observer, architect, and combatant in a war that has been raging inside you since birth. You have gained the capacity to detect the invisible currents, to anticipate the manipulations, and to construct defenses against them. But with this gift comes a chilling responsibility to act, to choose, to shape deliberately, or be swept along, forever altered and aware of your own vulnerability. The mini-climax strikes with brutal clarity. There is no going back. The neural circuits that fire in response to awareness, insight, and attention are stronger than those that once enforced oblivion. Every attempt to return to ignorance is futile. The pathways that now exist will insist on expression. You have witnessed the machinery of thought, felt the grip of repetition, understood the subtle strategies that shape obedience, identity, and desire. You are irrevocably changed. The mind that you carried into these pages is a ghost, replaced by one that is at once more fragile and more formidable, more susceptible and more sovereign. Philosophical reflection is stark and unforgiving. Knowledge is an intervention you cannot reverse. Awareness is both liberation and burden. You are now equipped to resist, to manipulate, to dominate, or to surrender to the very processes you have unveiled. Every choice, every repetition, every thought you cultivate from this point forward will carve new neural pathways, irreversibly shaping the architecture of your identity. You are the subject, the observer, and the experiment, forever changed by the simple act of understanding. The candle flickers one last time, shadows collapse into the corners, and the night presses close. Outside, the world continues its imperceptible manipulations. Inside, you sit a mind altered, aware, and unrepentant. You have passed the point of no return. There is no undoing it. You will never be the same. And in this, there is both terror and power. Epilogue. The ethical weight of knowing. The room is silent now, save for the low hum of your own thoughts. Darkness lingers in the corners, yet you feel a subtle light flickering inside, an awareness that cannot be extinguished. You have been through the journey. You have traced the hidden levers of your mind. watched your neural circuits bend under repetition and influence, and confronted the shadows that shape every decision. And now, a heavier truth emerges. Knowledge is not neutral, and it comes with an ethical weight you cannot escape. Understanding the mechanisms of control, neuroplasticity, repetition, reward loops, and invisible forces places a choice before you. You can use this knowledge to master yourself, to forge habits, behaviors, and thoughts that serve your autonomy. Or you can submit, consciously or unconsciously, letting the same forces that once enslaved you continue their silent work. There is no middle ground. There is no neutral brain. Every thought, every memory, every reaction will either reinforce your sovereignty or deepen your vulnerability. The psychological reality is stark. Knowledge of the mind is power, but power without discipline becomes a weapon against yourself or others. Awareness allows you to detect influence, anticipate manipulation, and restructure neural pathways, but it also exposes you to temptation, the seductive ease of controlling or exploiting what you understand. The ethical question is unavoidable. Will you use this insight to dominate your own mind, or will you allow it to dominate you? The stakes are internal, intimate, and irreversible. Consider the consequences of inaction. A mind left unexamined will follow the path of least resistance, drawn to habits, pleasure, and avoidance, each reinforcing the invisible chains you now recognize. Even subtle exposure to media, routines, social pressures reshapes thought, often without consent. To know these truths and ignore them is to betray your own neural architecture. To act is to acknowledge responsibility. To master is to accept the burden. Real-life parallels abound. Leaders, innovators, and visionaries understand the cost of awareness. They sculpt not only external outcomes but internal landscapes. Survivors of trauma, stroke, or extreme challenge who consciously rewire their brains achieve autonomy that others cannot comprehend. Monks, athletes, and elite operatives endure pain, repetition, and discipline to engineer mental resilience. Each example illustrates a simple fact: knowledge demands action. Knowledge without application is a kind of surrender. Directly to you, consider your mind as an ecosystem under siege. Every impulse, habit, and thought is a signal. You now possess the map and the tools to influence these signals intentionally. Every decision, what you consume, what you repeat, how you respond to stress, is a choice in the architecture of your cognition. Ethical mastery demands that you act deliberately, that you cultivate your mental environment, that you refuse to be a passive witness. There is no neutrality. Inaction is itself a choice, one that feeds the hidden manipulators of your own brain. The mini-climax emerges in clarity. Your brain will never be unshaped again. Every insight you have gained has left its mark. Every neural pathway touched by awareness, reflection, or intention is permanently altered. You cannot return to ignorance, nor can you plead innocence. The responsibility is absolute. And yet within this burden lies your greatest power. The capacity to decide, to reprogram, to master, and to shape a mind that serves your true will. The philosophical reflection is unflinching. To know the mechanics of your mind is to inherit both freedom and obligation. There is no neutral observer of thought. Every awareness demands accountability. Your brain, once a passive vessel, is now both canvas and weapon, capable of mastery or submission. The ethical weight of knowing is heavy, but it is also the final threshold of autonomy. You are free, but freedom carries a cost. You cannot ignore the responsibility of your own neural dominion. The candle has burned low. Shadows remain, yet you see more clearly than ever. Outside, the world continues its quiet manipulations. Inside, your mind stands at a threshold, aware, armed, and accountable. The ethical weight of knowing is yours to bear, and with it, the power to never be manipulated again. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.